Alright, we're on chapter 5, part 4, or part 5, I forgot. Love me, know you love me. How do you give this life-healing love to your spouse so he or she actually feels loved? This is a very crucial subject and skill. Let me start with an illustration before I begin to lay out the principles. In Kathy's family, her father regularly helped her mother with the chores. He was very involved in the day-to-day domestic operations, including care and feeding of the children. In my family, however, my father was never asked to do much in the way of chores inside the home, and in particular, he wasn't involved in clothing or feeding the kids. When we got married, we were barely aware of these differences in our family backgrounds, even though there had been one incident that should have tipped us off. Once I came to visit Kathy in her room. I ate dinner in the kitchen with her family. We'd progressed beyond the dining room and fine china stage, and when the meal was over, I simply stood up and walked out of the room. My future mother-in-law was appalled. In Kathy's household, everyone helped with the cleanup. At the very least, everyone was expected to take their plates and silverware and cups and any other item on the table next to their plates and bring it to the sink or refrigerator. When she saw that I never even gave this a thought, she muttered something to Kathy about my wanting people to wait on me. But in my family, my mother would have been insulted if even family members, let alone a guest, helped with the dishes. This was her job, to serve and do all those menial tasks so that others did not have to do them. This family background difference did not show itself in our marriage until the birth of our first child. I remember one day I was sitting holding David. When Kathy was working in the kitchen, I noticed a funny smell. Said, "Kathy, his diaper needs to be changed." And Kathy said, "Well, you know what we say around our house, don't you?" "What?" She said. "Finders keepers." She laughed. This meant, "Don't look at me, I'm busy, you've got the child. You change his dirty diaper." But I found myself becoming quite angry. I felt, well, I couldn't immediately put my finger on it. It seemed like a lack of respect. This shouldn't be my job. When I resisted, then it was Kathy's turn to feel annoyed. "Hey, it's just a dirty diaper. You aren't busy, and I am," she said. We didn't resolve the issue that day because we didn't really understand what was going on. The care of the children in general, and smelly poopy diapers in particular, became a bone of contention for a good while until we began to understand the underlying dynamics operating in our hearts. Kathy's mother had had a stroke when she was only in her 40s, and her father had stepped in to do many practical household chores in a way that was atypical for our parents' generation of working fathers and stay-at-home mothers. Her mother was deeply grateful for this and admired her husband's love and humility. Kathy heard her mother say, "This is how my husband loves me. He helps me with the chores and children." In my family, however, my father was never asked to do those kinds of chores. I'm not sure he ever saw the inside of a dirty diaper. He worked extremely long hours and was often very tired. My mother was grateful for his being a good provider and felt that the only way she could make an equal contribution to the family's welfare was if she asked him to do so absolutely nothing around the home. And I heard my mother say, "This is how I love your father. He works so hard, he provides for the family, so when he comes home, I don't ask him to do those things, I take care of them." This difference in our families was not merely a domestic division of labor. This was a difference in what we could call love currency. Kathy's father was a man of few words. He was not verbally expressive, but he gave his wife love in the particular way that she needed it, and that she knew was costly to him. It was far more valuable to her than if he had bought her flowers and jewelry. She appreciated it deeply, and it made her feel loved. My father, on the other hand, who worked long hours, could have had a wife who complained about virtually raising the children on her own. She did not, and he appreciated it deeply and felt like a king in his castle. We had observed these patterns of love currency in our respective families, and they had become part of our unconscious assumptions. And that is why we had a abiding conflict over who changes the diaper in this family. It was perplexing to us. At first it seemed like a pretty simple issue. Why was there so much emotional heat around it? Eventually we realized that when Kathy asked me to change her son's diaper, I heard her saying that she didn't love me, that she didn't think I worked that hard. And when I asked her to be the one to change the diaper, she heard me saying it was women's work, not really important. In short, Kathy was actually saying at a semi-conscious level, if you love me the way my father loved my mother, you would change the diaper. And I was saying in my heart, if you love me the way my mother loved my father, you wouldn't even be asking me. Each of us heard the others saying, I don't love you, because each of us was failing to get love in a particular way we felt was emotionally valuable to us. What happened? We realized what was going on, and in that particular instance, it was I who made the change, because I didn't want to fall into a pattern of pitting my work against involvement with my children. But the lesson was one that we never forgot. It is not enough to simply say, I love you, nor is it enough to give love to your spouse in the way to which you feel most accustomed. If you want to give a person $100, there are many ways to do so. You could give it in cash or by check or in gold or in kind. You could give it in different currencies. So you ask, in which form do you want the $100? In the same way, you learn to give your spouse love in the way he or she finds most emotionally valuable and powerful. That is the only way to bring the remarking and healing power of love into your spouse's life. The currencies of love. What we call love currencies are often called love languages. This metaphor is also very helpful. If we say I love you to someone who does not understand a word of English, then the love does not get through. We are sending it, but it is not being received. We must learn to send love in forms that the other person can comprehend. I will dare to use one more metaphor. A radio signal may be sent out on one frequency, but the radio receiver does not respond if it is turned to another frequency. In the same way, a husband may be sending out the message, I love you, by being very sensual and romantic towards his wife. But that might not be where her love receiver is tuned. He doesn't listen sympathetically to her when she wants to talk about the things that discourage her. She just really wants an understanding listener, but he is impatient, usually barking out some brief advice. So she tells her husband, I don't feel you love me. He retorts, but I do love you. Why the discrepancy? He is sending his love over a channel to which she is not attuned. This is why so often love is being sent in a marriage but is not received. There are many different ways to express love. You could buy a present, say I love you out loud, give a compliment, be romantic and tender physically, abide by your loved one's wishes, and spend time and focused attention. That's just the beginning of the list. For centuries, thinkers have discerned forms of love. The Greeks had words to distinguish affection, storge, love between friends, philos, erotic love, eros, and service, agape. There are other ways of breaking down expressions of love into categories. All forms of love are necessary, and none are to be ignored. But all of us find some forms of love to be more emotionally valuable to us. They're a currency that we find particularly precious, a language that delivers the message of love to our hearts with the most power. Some types of love are more thrilling and fulfilling to us when we receive them. Why? Sometimes a particular form of love is more valuable because some significant person in your life was particularly inept at it. Perhaps a form of love is crucial not because of your life circumstances. At any rate, some forms of love especially delight your heart. Anyone who wants to give you love needs to know what those forms are and to express his or her love in those ways. We should do this for our spouses because God did this for us. When Moses asked to see God's glory, he was told that he couldn't see it, that it would be lethal. Yet, in the Gospel of John, we read that God has come in human form so that Jesus, we beheld his glory, glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. That is amazing. God expresses glory to us in a form we could relate to. A human form, the incarnation. God came to us in a manner that we could grasp. So we too must clothe our love in forms to which our spouse can relate. We must communicate love in a way our spouse needs it. Here are some practical principles for doing that. First, realize you have a filter on. You tend to only hear certain kinds of love language. For example, your spouse may be working hard to provide you with material things, but you wish he were more verbal. There is a tendency to say he doesn't love me, but he is not communicating love in your most valuable language. Take off your filter and recognize the love your spouse is giving you. Theologian R.C. Sproul once told us a story about himself and his wife, Vesta, that illustrates this principle. What I really wanted for my birthday was something I wouldn't buy for myself. I was hoping for golf clubs. Vesta, a practical person, knew I needed white shirts, so she brought me 6 beautiful white shirts. I tried not to show my disappointment. When it came time for Vesta's birthday, however, he didn't do anything better. Wanting to give her something lavish and extravagant, he bought her a fur coat, not realizing what she wanted was a new washer and dryer. They were both trying hard to express love to each other, but they were speaking their own languages to a person who needed to hear love in different dialect. Consider some of the running conflicts you have with your spouse are not love language conflicts that can soften your attitude and change your strategy. You could, like Kathy and I, have an intractable conflict over childcare responsibilities. But it could be that the husband is thinking as I did, if you love me like my mother loved my father, you'd not ask me to change diapers. And if the wife could be thinking as Kathy did, if you love me like my father loved my mother, you'd volunteer. Instead of thinking about the other person, he is so selfish, each should think she is feeling particularly unloved. Learn the primary languages of your spouse and send love over those channels, not over the channels you prefer for yourself. We tend to give love through the channels in which we like to receive it. Remember that improper love languages can be heard in reverse. For example, if you give material gifts to a person who wants some other form, she may say, "You are trying to buy my love." Never abuse the primary love language. Never withhold it to hurt the other, for the hurt will go deep. A man who greatly values getting respect from his wife in public will not be able to take it when she mocks him in front of their friends. A woman who needs lots of verbal affirmation will be devastated by the silent treatment. Oh, that's sad.